Perfect. So today we're going to talk about a brief overview of the 12 elements of effective volunteer engagement. That will be the theme of our 2023 webinar. We'll also introduce element 2, volunteer job descriptions. We began in February, so we'll double up on a topic later on in the year. But February was strategic planning, and then this month is volunteer job descriptions. And then we'll also discuss the implementation of volunteer job descriptions in practice with Amy Pinger, who is the Senior Community Engagement Manager and the Director of AmeriCorps at Harvesters, the Community Food Network, which is one of our 3 food banks in Kansas. So our 12 elements of volunteer engagement. My clicker is not working. Yep. There we go. Do we see a planning on there? Now we do. Perfect. Thank you. I see some good nods. Okay, so strategic planning was our topic for February, and the 12 elements of effective volunteer management are the essential elements that make a volunteer program most effective and sustainable. So planning. Before developing or expanding a volunteer program, it's essential to build the foundation for volunteer engagement by planning what your program will look like or what your expansion will look like. This is a great time to garner organizational support through the planning process and helps create a positive culture of volunteerism throughout your entire agency. We talked about strategic program planning in February, and a recording of this webinar can be found on our website. Volunteer job descriptions. We'll talk more about volunteer job descriptions or position descriptions today with our special guest, Amy Pinger. Recruitment is the process of finding and encouraging people to give their time and energy to your organization. Great recruitment targets the audience most likely to have the skills and the interests that match the volunteer positions that are available with your organization and the position descriptions that you've created. Screening is an opportunity to assess a volunteer's skills and determine if the volunteer and the organization are good fits for each other. We take the information that we learned during the screening, and then we'll use that information to place volunteers in the most appropriate assignment. When we do screening and placement really well, we're able to prevent many issues that could come up later on down the road, issues that maybe pertain to supervision or management in the future. Orientation is our opportunity to give a general overview of the organization's mission and vision, the current programming, the organization's history, community impact, and all of the information that a volunteer will need to be successful with your organization. This is often the volunteer's first impression of your organization, and it's really important that we're leveraging this great opportunity that's going to set the tone really for our relationship with the volunteer moving forward. Comprehensive initial training as well as ongoing training throughout the duration of the volunteer service are critical to a volunteer's success with your organization. Training directly impacts the 3 R's of volunteer management, which are recruitment, retention, and recognition. We'll talk about both orientation and training during the same session in June. That will be our June webinar. Volunteers need ongoing communication with staff while they're working to feel supported and successful, as well as scheduled annual reviews. So supervision will be a big overhaul in July. Recognition and acknowledgement will be our August webinar. And volunteer recognition can include both formal and informal appreciation, which is typically what we think of, but it also includes feedback, ongoing communication and support, and including volunteers in decision-making processes when it's appropriate. All of these efforts indicate and communicate the significance of the work that our volunteers are doing. Effective volunteer programs have a person, a staff, or sometimes a volunteer whose job it is to manage all of the details of scheduling appropriate assignments, volunteer support, the retention, recognition, and evaluation. Clear ongoing communication between the coordinator, the volunteers, and program staff or the clients is essential to establishing good working relationships among everybody who is involved. Reports of cumulative achievements of your volunteers should be shared with them routinely throughout the year, as well as with leadership and administration, funding sources, and the community. Asking volunteers to share feedback about their experience is a valuable way to evaluate your program success. Additionally, providing feedback to your volunteers about their performance can help maintain motivation, encourage personal growth, and program improvement. We know that using volunteers to assist paid staff requires the support of the entire organization. It's critical that all staff members understand the importance of recruiting, of screening, of placing the volunteers and recognizing them, as well as the ways that volunteers support their work as well. It's essential that we as volunteer professionals work together with paid staff to ensure their buy-in and their full support of the volunteers in your program. And that's in December. So creating volunteer job descriptions defines the work that volunteers will be doing as specifically as possible. Position descriptions are really important because they define the work the volunteer will be doing, and they set the expectations of both the volunteer and the agency at the beginning of the relationship. And doing that at the beginning really helps to mitigate the risk and provides a clear understanding of the training and support a volunteer will receive. And that helps them to be most impactful in their new role. So a great position description is going to include the following. We'll need to have a title. And your title is going to provide a description that gives the volunteer a sense of identity. We want to recognize your volunteers with a title that's appropriate for their role. And this also helps other program staff and other volunteers understand the assigned role. We'll want to use 1 or 2 sentences to describe the specific purpose of the position. What is the ultimate goal of the position? We'll consider, how does the position relate to the mission? And what does success look like in this position when the job is done well? Describe where the person will be working. Is this going to be entirely on site, or are there other considerations to be aware of? Especially if you are placing a volunteer with an agency partner, you'll want to detail where supervision happens and then also where the work will happen. We'll want to include key responsibilities. This can also be called the position summary. List the position's major responsibilities and clearly define what the volunteer is expected to do as part of the assignment. Clearly list education, experience, knowledge, skills, and any age requirements if your organization has them. Also note if the opportunity is accessible to people with disabilities, and if a background check is required for the work, it should be indicated here. With our time commitment, we'll want to note the length of the assignment if it has a start and stop point, the hours per week that are expected, and any other special requirements that pertain to the time of the volunteer. A great job description will define the nature and the length of all general and job-specific training that's required for the assignment. This is also a great place to list the resources and other support that may be available to the volunteer during their time in service with you. So if they'll have any options for ongoing training or specialized training, if it's possible for you to send them to conferences pertaining to their work, you'd want to include that here. And then benefits, just like a staff job description, we'll want to include any benefits that are available to the volunteer. This could be anything like a t-shirt for their service, to development opportunities. When you're considering what benefits you need to include, ask yourself, what can a volunteer expect to get out of this position? And then we'll list the staff person or volunteer leader who will be working most directly with the volunteer and his or her contact information. Who will a volunteer turn to for guidance or supports? If the volunteer supervisor is different from the staff person the volunteer will have the most direct contact with day to day, clearly describe the expectations of both the staff roles and the expectations around how communication and supervision will work with your agency. Describe how often the supervisor will follow up or check in with the volunteer and whether that's going to be on an ongoing or more specific basis like weekly or monthly. And I have a really great job description here from Amy. Can you all see this well on your screens? Okay, so this is a VEC Special Projects volunteer. The VEC is the Volunteer Engagement Center at Harvesters. So that looks a lot like sorting and packing food typically, but without much explanation of what Harvesters volunteer roles look like, we should be able to read this job description and know what work they're doing. So looking at this together, we've got the title, the departments, who the supervisor is going to be. And in this case, that would be the Volunteer Engagement Center supervisor, the person who is working most closely day-to-day with the volunteer. The program. The Volunteer Engagement Center is a vital part of Harvester's mission to mobilize the power of our community to create equitable access to nutritious food and address the root cause and impact of hunger. So we've got a direct tie in that first sentence to the mission of the organization. In the VEC, volunteers sort and repack food, which assist harvesters in feeding more than 226,000 people each month. And then the position summary. The VEC Special Projects volunteer will support Harvesters Volunteer Engagement Center staff in project preparation, cleaning, and sanitizing before and after weekly volunteer shifts. So we've got in the program description, a much larger general tie to the organization and mission, and then a very specific and detailed project outline in the position summary. So we've got the high level and then the day-to-day level. The primary tasks include assisting the VEC staff with setting up the volunteer project. That could include any number of these things as you see listed here, very specific. And then the hours of service that describe the time commitment. So they're saying that they are willing to they're able to host a special projects volunteer within the parameter of these hours, Tuesday, 12 to 4, Wednesday, 8 to noon, etc. Our training and support is what we can expect out of the agency to support the volunteer. The volunteers will complete Harvesters food safety training annually, telling exactly how often that's expected. And then volunteers will receive warehouse and OSHA safety training. On to the next page, this is a 2-page job description. Volunteers are not allowed to serve in the Volunteer Engagement Center without a Harvester staff member. So very clear expectation of the position there as well. We've got our qualifications. They want someone to be 18 years or older. They're going to need to be able to lift 25 pounds, comfortable serving in a warehouse environment like Amy's background. And then you're not going to be able to wear open-toed shoes. We've got our statement right below. Harvesters is committed to providing an environment free from harassment. If your organization already has this is a great place to include that as well. And then in Harvesters case, they have the volunteer sign this job description, as well as the community engagement manager and the VEC manager, who would in this case be supporting or overseeing the position. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment and bring Amy on, who is really an expert in this. Amy does volunteer job descriptions with her team and her volunteers really well, which is why I've asked her to be here today.
Thank you.
Okay, Amy, I know that Harvesters hosts thousands of volunteers every year. I need to move my do you have a job description for every single one of those volunteers, or is that something that's more of a case-by-case basis? And if so, how do you discern who is going to have one?
Yeah, so typically Harvesters is hosting thousands of volunteers a month, and about 70% of our volunteers are serving on site in our volunteer engagement center space. A lot of these volunteers are one-time volunteers, episodic volunteers. And so with those, we really look at the way the volunteers are signing up to complete this as their position description. So listed on our website, it clearly defines the time commitment, the qualifications, in order to serve. So for example, in order to serve in our volunteer engagement center space, you have to be 8 years or older. So that's clearly listed on the website as they're signing up. So for us, we view them signing up online as them acknowledging that position description, because all of those elements are captured within that online sign up for these episodic volunteers. So we feel like that sort of covers the risk management piece, which is the most important piece of this volunteer position description. And then we have other more specialized volunteer opportunities. So we have a court-ordered community service program that has its own orientation, position description. We have this special projects volunteer position that we just looked at. This is a longer term volunteer engagement. It's also operating equipment, which is going to need more intense training. We have volunteers that go out to our agency partners and serve out there as well, that we help to recruit and build those positions with those agency partners. So we try and have every volunteer that comes in to serve have a position description of some kind. We don't often hand, the 60 volunteers every day a paper, like, here's your position description, but it is captured online for them. So they do see that, they do acknowledge that.
That makes a ton of sense, because it just seems unfeasible to, when you've got 6,000 people coming in and out of your doors every single year, to try to get them all to do that. So that makes a ton of sense. So for more generalized practice or more generalized work, this is the expectation. But if you've got someone who's doing more specialized work, then this becomes really important for you.
Yes.
Who is involved in the process of writing these descriptions? Is it just the community engagement team, or do you have other key staff that are involved?
Yeah, so I may step back 1 second and talk about how we sort of structure our volunteer engagement at Harvesters. So we have our community engagement team, which I'm the senior manager of that department. And our department is in charge of volunteer engagement as a whole. So scheduling, creating position descriptions, working on those relationships recognition, all the 12 elements that goes with our team. And then we put our volunteers out either at an agency partner, or we put them out in our volunteer engagement center. And so like I said, about 70% of our volunteers are out in our volunteer engagement center. They're working with our volunteer engagement center staff, which is our warehouse staff. Their expertise is the project. Their expertise is knowing how to operate the heavy equipment. And so when we're creating position descriptions like this, it's a collaborative process, because I'm going to know all of the elements that we need to make sure we cover, but they're going to know the fine details and specifics of what they need within that position. They're going to know the hours that are needed within that position. And so putting it together where these two teams are coming together to create this job description together gets buy-in from the staff that's working directly with the volunteers, which is critical. I know you're going to talk about that in December, but it also really fully describes what the volunteers are going to do. If we're going out to place them with an agency, we're going to work directly with that agency, because again, they're going to know the ins and outs of what exactly that they need. So it definitely is a collaborative process. We also, so for this position description, we sign this with the managers for both departments. So myself as the manager of Over Community Engagement, and then our Volunteer Engagement Center manager as well. That way it's supported organizationally. So it's not just something where somebody can walk in and like sign it and then just like start today. There's more structure, there's more training. My team is responsible for half of the training, and then the volunteer engagement manager is responsible for the other half. So it makes sure that we're all sort of on the same page with that.
That brings me to, so when you're describing the different pieces of training, what might those two pieces look like?
Yeah, so for us, when we're talking about our volunteer engagement center, that is going to be very specific to the project at hand. So when they walk in the door, we do an overview, we take them out. Today we're doing back snack. Here's how you do back snack, and it's on the job, right there, right before your shift. And there's always somebody with the volunteers out there. With the special projects volunteer, because it is more a more intense role, they're going to get training, OSHA training, which is warehouse safety training, on how to operate the heavy equipment, how to make sure that pallets are stacked, and those kinds of things. We also do training for our food safety, which is the piece that they do annually. And that is looking at, what does bad produce look like? How do we store it in the warehouse to ensure that we're not inviting pests in the warehouse? As you can see, we've got pallets and things like that. So that is something that we do online with them, but the OSHA is more in-person, hands-on training with that manager.
So often I feel like with any of our programs, regardless of the population that we're serving, our volunteers, they're not necessarily being supervised by the person who is working with them day to day. So how can we mitigate any questions about supervision, or who they should come to with questions or concerns if that's not the person that they see when they come in and out?
Yeah, I think this is where that communication between the staff roles is really important, and making sure that everybody is on the same page, which is why I like to start it from creating that position description at the beginning. How are we going to communicate challenges, issues? We have recently had a meeting with our team where we really clearly outlined, if this is the concern that the volunteer has, this is who's responsible for handling that. And so clarifying that within our staff, we called it like our lanes of authority. So here's Amy's lane of authority. If it's a concern about, the volunteer is, out there and not doing their job, or, that's an Amy lane of authority. If they're operating the equipment unsafely, this is a, lane of authority for our warehouse team. And so just putting that out there is really helpful. And then constantly doing some check-ins. So they may see our volunteer engagement center supervisor day in, day out, but our community engagement supervisor or myself will touch base with them. Hey, how's it going? Love to see you. And really keeping that communication open between the volunteer and the different folks that are interacting with them, but also between this at the staff level as well.
So it's really beautiful and wonderful if we can get all of this done on the front end, but many of us are in positions where we have volunteers who are doing the work. They're settled into their positions, but we're realizing that we need to tighten up our programming or double down on our risk management. How can we implement strategies like this retroactively and garner buy-in and make sure it goes over smoothly? That's a big ask.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is. And I will say this too, because, when you think about that, a lot of times when people look at volunteer management, they're like, this is too much. Where do we even start? I don't even know. And I always, say, eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? It's one bite at a time. And so we're a 40-plus-year-old organization who is still working on position descriptions. We're still working on things. So it's not, I think sometimes people think like, I have to do all of it right now. And that's okay, to sort of eat it off just a little bit at a time. Position descriptions are a great place to start. Implementing them retroactively is not the funnest thing to do. So let's just be honest, it's not a fun thing to do. But what's really important is how we communicate it. So the thing that I have found most success with is communicating it with our internal team first, our staff team. Here's what we're going to do, and here's why we're going to do it. When you frame the why as this is managing risk for our organization, it helps to get buy-in from folks because they really care about the organization. For a staff, this is helping to ensure that you continue to have a job, that we continue to be able to serve our neighbors that need the food. And the same thing for the volunteers. The volunteers truly are there because they care about your mission. They care about making a difference in the community. And so framing it with them as this is something that we need to implement in order to manage the risk for the organization. If they were to get hurt, this provides a job description so that they know the role that they were performing. This also allows us to be able to recruit this position in the future. So if we have had this volunteer in this position forever, and they've been doing this work and now they're retired, or now they want to go and have a vacation, it allows the organization to have sort of a structure of what they do. I think we've all been in that position where, well, Joe's always done it. Joe's always done this work forever. That's great. Have Joe help write the position description. Have Joe's involvement. Have Joe help give feedback to that. And that could be the way that you get that volunteer who's always done this position to sort of see the value that they bring to the organization and help provide that structure. That's great whenever you can do that. If there's not somebody in that position who's willing to share that, a lot of times it's because they're coming from a place of like, I don't want recognition, which is very sweet, but not sustainable, right? So we have to create something that can help sustain the organization so that if Joe's not there, if Amy's not in this position, other people have an understanding of the roles, the responsibility, and really managing that risk piece.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So earlier I mentioned that part of recognition, normally we think about those really formal ways that we do that, whether that's giving them a name tag or a certificate or having an appreciation event. But things that happen in the day-to-day, like asking for input, are really important ways to recognize volunteers, their contribution and their meaning to your organization in a great way, as Amy mentioned, to ask for buy-in as well. We've got a question in the chat. So we're wondering, what is your volunteer to paid staff ratio?
Yeah, so in our volunteer engagement center space, we do 25 volunteers at a time, and we have one staff member down there overseeing it. That's where this special projects volunteer can be really helpful because they can also be down there to support. And so if volunteers have questions, they can be down there to sort of answer questions. That's what, again, makes it a higher level volunteer position. So that's in our volunteer engagement center. With the position that VEC special projects, typically it's a one-to-one sort of a relationship that we have there. But we have had volunteers that are doing multiple. We have a couple different volunteers to the staff person in those higher level roles.
Perfect. I'm going to ask you just a couple more questions, and then if you all have questions that you want to throw in the chat, you're welcome to, but we'll also open up. You can come off mute in just a few minutes and ask Amy questions or myself questions as well. So how has this, Amy, implementing this element been impactful for your organization or specifically for your team?
Yeah, I think it gives clarity for our team, which is really important. The thing that we've also talked about a lot is it gives both the volunteers and the staff as well the ability to say no, which I think is so important. I think a lot of times when people sign up, we either expect too much from them and we're like, we need you. We know it says 4 days, but we really need you more days. And so they can say, well, this is what I signed up for, and this is what I was expecting from this position description. And so it gives people, that opportunity to say, that may not be the best fit for me. And I think sometimes that's really hard, especially in a volunteer situation, because you love it, you're so passionate about it. It also gives some sort of parameters, so we're all clear about who's in the building, when they're in the building, what is the work that they're doing, what does that look like, so we know the support and the structure. One of the things that we've talked about for a long time is needing additional staff for our volunteer engagement center space, and by having this really high level position description created for our volunteers, we can clearly bring the data together to present to our officers and say, hey, we've had a volunteer in this really high level role, and we think it is time for us to get a staff member, and here's why. Here's how many hours they've served. Here is what the impact that they have had. Here's what we've been able to do. And so it allows us, again, to kind of collect data Whereas if we just keep saying, yeah, we need more help, we need more help, but we haven't sort of put a structure in place, we don't have the sort of data to justify that additional help and support that we need. And with this project, with this position specifically, we have documented hours of how much time we have used this volunteer in this position. And so it really sort of helps make that case a little bit stronger. It also helps with transition. And so, we have had a volunteer in this role for a very long time, and he's sort of like, I want to go travel with my family more, or I want to spend more time with my bees. And because he's a beekeeper, which is pretty awesome. And so it allows us to take that position description and post it and get a new person in. Because I think, especially as volunteer managers, that can be a fear of like, if it's not this person, then who will ever do this? And with those position descriptions already created, it allows us to really say, okay, this is what we need, and then post that and share that out to get somebody new in.
Yeah, I think that many of us, we do so many things. We have so many hats as volunteer managers or leaders of volunteers, as do our volunteers. So if someone were to need to take, 6 months off, what do we do? And so this is a great continuancy strategy that can set us up for success, like should that ever happen.
We
Um,
saw that a lot during the pandemic. I will add that.
mm,
We saw that a lot during the pandemic. A lot of our agency partners had the same volunteers that always came in and they always did it. And then the pandemic happened, and maybe they were high risk volunteers. And so they could not come back in and do this. And so the organization lost a lot of institutional knowledge and the ability to recover because there weren't these well-defined position descriptions. And so that's again where if we have that volunteer that's established, that's been doing this for a long time, it's a great opportunity to have them engaged in writing that so that, should, I hope a global pandemic never happens again, but it does allow that continuation of services. And that's
and
a
me,
great why. Like, that's a great why to share.
is a great why. And maybe that's a great first place to start if we're unsure of how to start implementing this element. Maybe you've got a volunteer who's already doing, specialized project work. And so asking them for buy-in and starting there is, maybe a first step that we can take when we want to implement this into our larger programming. So we've looked at your special projects volunteer position description today. Is that the only specialized project that you have with your organization?
We have another one that we use, and this volunteer has again been with us for a very long time. And we actually created this position description and then recruited him for this position description. And we've had to make adjustments to the position description since he's been here, because he goes out and picks up all of our food drives. So as the food bank, we're constantly asking people to donate food, and we need to send them barrels. We need to get those barrels back. We need to bring the food in. And so he actually drives our company vehicles. And so before we were able to get him started, we had to do a driver's license check for him. We had to do some background screening for him. And then as the organizational policies have changed, now we do a yearly check on those. And so we had to make some adjustments to the position description along the way. But it's really clearly outlined. And so the same kind of situation, as he's traveling more with his family, we can post that out and know that we've already got the structure, we've already got the processes in place. With our agency partners, we have 760 agency partners across 26 counties. And we say that if you've seen one agency partner, you've seen one agency partner, because they're all vastly different. And so when we are working with them and trying to support them by helping them with volunteer recruitment, which is a really awesome thing for us to do together, we would build those position descriptions specific to that role in that organization.
Awesome, thank you. I'd like to take a few minutes to just open up questions to our participants. If you have anything, you're welcome to drop that in the chat or come off mute and just ask.
I have a question. Hi, this is Tierney again. So when you say you're posting your job descriptions, does that look like how anybody else, company, profit, non-for-profit would post a job description?
Oh, that's a great question. So we use a volunteer database, and our volunteer database is called Service. And so in that database that we have, it has it all outlined in there. So this is the time of the shift. This is how many people we need. These are all of your requirements. And so the volunteers can go in, create their own profiles, and then see all of these opportunities, and then see which opportunity most aligns with their time frame that's available, with their skills, and with the commitment level that they'd like to bring to the organization.
Thank you.
We also use that database to send out information. So because all of their profile information is collected, all of their emails are collected, if we have a special opportunity, we will send that out and say, hey, we have a food drive coming up at Dylan's, and here's what that looks like. And so we can use that as, again, more recruitment, especially because a lot of our volunteers, 70% are episodic. They come one time. So if we can get them to come back again and do another opportunity, this is also where I love having those agency opportunities, because I, at the food bank, I'm not offering you this. You're coming into a warehouse, you're putting food into a bag. But if I can connect you with one of my agency partners who's directly putting food in somebody's car, that's a different volunteer experience that I, as harvesters, can't offer you, but my agency partners can. And so volunteers have different temperament levels. Some love my warehouse. Some just want to spend all day with my warehouse. Others are really craving that more personal connection. And so by creating that additional opportunity and partnering in that way, we can provide that as well. I think Susan has her hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Amy. Thank you for taking my question. So my question is about, and maybe you touched on this, but how I just feel like with those episodic volunteers, the one or two times that they come in, I mean, do you even talk to them about what the job description is in that initial piece, or before they get started, or?
It sort of depends. So everything about the position is posted online. So it gives the background, it gives the history. So if I'm a volunteer, and I've done this with my kids, actually they've come and volunteered with me at Harvesters. I can go on and I can learn all about it based on that posting online. And so for some volunteers, that's enough. That's all they need. We've also had volunteers that'll call us and say, hey, I'm interested in helping feed people. How do I do this? And so we will have those conversations with them to kind of, this is what this position looks like. Might this be a good fit for you? We do volunteer recruitment fairs where we also share that piece, that information. And so it just sort of depends on how they're coming to us, which level of information they get.
And Amy is working with For Clarity. Amy's volunteer engagement model is a little more fixed. So we harvesters wouldn't be seeing volunteers come in unannounced or unexpected. There are set shifts for the volunteer engagement center that they sign up for, calling or signing up online, which is a little different than some organizations. So just wanted to make that distinction. Well, all right. If we have no more questions, we will move on and start wrapping up our session for today. And I can start sharing my screen with you again. Perfect. And thank you, Amy, so much. I think that this is one of those things that can be a little bit scary and tricky to start. And knowing that your organization is doing this, that your team is doing this is really, really helpful. And if anyone has further questions about the content today of volunteer job descriptions, you're welcome to email us at volunteer@ksde.org or email me directly. We can get those questions to Amy. She's also our commissioner, so she's very involved with the Kansas Volunteer Commission. And thank you for being here with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So the vision of the Kansas Volunteer Commission is to empower all Kansans to meet community need through service. Our primary role is to provide resources like this and leadership to support local initiatives that tackle community needs. And as the State Service Commission, we direct effective national service programs and provide resources and training to advance volunteerism, mentoring, and civic engagement. Our 2023 webinar series includes the mentoring webinar series, which is the first Thursday of every month from 1 to 2. You're welcome to register using the Zoom link here or also on our website as well. We have the volunteer engagement webinar series on the second Tuesday of every month from 10 to 11. And then the civic engagement webinar series, which is the third Friday of every month from 12 to 1. And all of those have really wonderful content. So I can say that even if you're not directly working with mentoring or civic engagement, it's wonderful to be able to hop on. You never know what resources you'll find throughout these. Our 2023 mini grant series has been posted. We just closed our volunteer manager support mini grant. The next mini grant will be released on March 27th, and that is the Youth Civic Engagement Mini Grant. You can go to the website for more guidelines on the application or to download the application. And then upcoming events, we are starting the Kansas Give Back Challenge, the Give Back Kansas Challenge. This is an 8-week challenge running from April 17th through June 9th to engage Kansans in employer-supported volunteering, both during and outside the workday. You can find more information at the link provided in the flyer or go to canserve.ksde.org and then click Take Action, which would be in the banner. Our next volunteer engagement webinar will be April 11th, 2023 from 10 to 11. And then that topic, we're moving on to the third element of effective volunteer engagement, which is volunteer recruitment. An exciting topic for all of us. And ways to stay connected, you can visit our website at canserve.org or sign up for our monthly newsletter by emailing volunteer@ksde.org or invite us to present to other groups that you might be involved in, might benefit from the Commission's resources. You can also follow us on social media. We have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Thank you all so much for being here. We appreciate your time and hope to see you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Did you stop the recording?